so many of us suffer from guilt, shame, family expectations, people pleasing. We want to be there, we want to show up for other people, and sometimes that actually can dictate our future and where we end up. And I want to read a quote from you. What are people going to think if you leave your husband and 2 kids while his mum is in the hospital and the whole family is mourning his father's passing just so that you can go off and audition? What kind of mother are you to leave your kids for a month? What kind of wife are you? Now, this is a negative voice in your head telling yourself the guilt and the shame that if you left and went for your dream,
yes,
but you didn't listen. And that was the audition that led you to literally getting the role on Jane the Virgin.
right.
There's another world where you don't.
Exactly, exactly.
So how the hell, for anyone listening right now, did you overcome and not succumb to the voice in your head telling you that you should stay?
Well, I had been a working actress for a long time, living in New York. And then I stopped to have children. And that was a huge impact on my life. And I wanted to be there for them. I wanted to put my imprint on my kids. I didn't want to have a nanny raising my children. I wanted to instill the morals and values and that I thought that they should have, and I wanted to keep them safe. I took my job as a mom very seriously. And so what ended up happening was I would hold myself back from a lot of auditions because I wanted to be home. But then it got to a point where I was losing my own identity. I was losing sight or feelings of who I was before I had children. And that's not good either. And how I made myself go was say to myself, Andrea, do you want to look back and have regret that you didn't go? Do you want to continue to live the life that you're living now, which wasn't a bad life? I loved being with my children when they were home, but my dream to be an actress, a successful actress, I had that before I even got married. So was I going to let it stop me being a mom? Honestly, it was just an excuse, and I do believe that. And that can be hard, that can sound hard, but I realized after going through the exercise of making myself talk to my husband, getting him on board, and getting myself on that plane to go to LA, and then ultimately booking Jane the Virgin, and then seeing how my life changed for the better and what an impact Jane the Virgin had on my life, on the little girl in me, on so many other fans' lives. I go, wow, Jane the Virgin could never have happened. I could have come back with no job. The most important thing in this story for me that I wrote about in the book is that it didn't matter. What mattered was I went against the fear inside. I went against the negative voices in my head that were telling me I wasn't good enough, I was a bad mom, I was a bad wife, you're probably not going to book a job. What really ultimately was that I was afraid that I would fail and that I would come back with nothing. And that would have been the real thing that held me back. Not my children, not my husband, none of that. It would have been my fear of failing. And then I realized, I said, Andrea, all of those were excuses. Bad wife, bad mom. You were scared to go and fail. I won. I'm on the plane. I slayed that dragon of fear. And whatever happens after this, I'm good with it because I know that I won over the fear. And that was the most important thing.
Dude, that's so powerful. I love that you sat on the plane, you're like, I won. I really want people to actually use that now.
Yeah.
Like once you make the decision, no matter what the outcome is, tell yourself you won. Like I'm so tactical.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so freaking powerful.
It is. And even like as simple as I went to the gym today. Sometimes, like, I don't know, I'm sure other people can relate to this. I will have this thing in my head that says, you got to go to the gym. Well, I don't really feel like it, and I just want to stay home, and I got other things to do, and I just rather do whatever. And then I don't go. And then there's those days where I'm like, nope, I got to get to the gym, and I get to the gym. So it's every time I get to the gym, I win. Every time I eat something well, I win. You know, every time I do something that I'm scared of, I freaking won. I won against that. And it's a daily battle, and it's a daily choice, and it will never go away.
It's interesting that you call them excuses, which by the way, I freaking love. How do you start to decipher though, what is a real reason versus what is an actual excuse that you're just using? Because feeling like a good mother, like I can really understand that. Like I always
Yeah.
like don't think of it as an excuse, but when you position it as it's an excuse for your fear to use, now I freaking get it. So
Yeah.
how the hell do you decipher the two?
I believe if you have a genuine desire or dream or goal that you want to go for, then that is something that God or the universe has planted inside of you. And if you're not going for it because of external factors or even the negative voices in your head, then you're choosing wrong. You have to go with what your true desire is. If it's truly something you want, something that's good for you, something that's positive, how can it be wrong if it's a positive thing for you?
Well, that's a really great question. How can it be wrong? I think potentially it can be wrong when other people around you are telling you it's wrong. Not necessarily
Exactly.
that your internal dialogue's telling you,
Right.
but other people are telling you.
Yeah. No, I mean, gosh, I don't usually have people like that in my sphere. I carefully choose the people in my life. I will say there's been one or two times when people tell me I can't do something or I can't have something, it pisses me off so bad that I go, well then you watch me. You watch me. I kind of like, I use it as motivation, that's healthy anger right there. No, I don't believe I can't have people like that in my sphere. It's easy for me to say, but no, if I feel like someone's tearing me down, they're not supporting me, I can't have them. But honestly, I had to learn that. I had to learn that. That has taken me a very long time to get to that place where therapy, working on myself and journaling and figuring out me and listening to my own internal dialogue, the one that is positive. Because, you can have so many voices in your head, negative voices. I think anything that's a negative that's going on in your head is a lie. It's a freaking lie. If it's something good for you, and then you have another voice telling you, oh, don't do that. Like, don't go to the gym or don't, whether it's a
You
lie
know,
or
if you're like
not.
tricking yourself.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Dude, okay, so in you saying everything what you just said, right, where you cut them, not really cut them out of your life, you just don't allow them into your life because the toxicity is very beautiful and powerful. But you talk in your book about having been in an abusive relationship
Right.
with an ex-boyfriend, and I actually have a quote of yours. This is in reference to meeting Marco and being in this abusive relationship. Those arguments eventually led him to hitting me. The first time I was shocked but not surprised, as I'd seen this modeled to me growing up. I didn't like getting hit, but it was familiar to me. I was afraid to leave. What would life be like without a boy? He was my anchor. So going from having an abusive relationship and calling him your anchor, even amidst that abuse, to now where you sit here today saying, I don't allow toxicity into my life and I just don't allow those people around me. So you said therapy obviously was a big thing.
Sure.
If you don't mind taking me through the pivot that you originally made, because I'd love to walk people through how you went from that to where you are today.
Sure.
And maybe take us back to the story where he sicks his dog on you.
Yes. So believe it or not, I was a teenager. I was 16 and I had a boyfriend who was 2 years older than me. Growing up in the South Bronx was not the best area to grow up in. And one of the things that was popular at the time and kind of is sort of in certain circles were pit bulls and fighting pit bulls. It was kind of like a thing in my neighborhood. So anyway, he had two pit bulls and the two could not get along. So he had to separate the two dogs in the house. One was a nice dog and the other one was a vicious dog. I literally had a physical fight with him one day where he was sicking his dog on me and he had her on the leash because we were arguing, and then I had to convince him to lock the dog up. And I says, "Oh, you're such a tough guy." I was trying to use reverse psychology to get him to get the dog away from me. He locks the dog up and he comes back and he starts poking me in my head. What you gonna do now? What you gonna do now? And I don't know what, a switch flipped in my head. I lost my shit. And it was like, I'd seen abuse growing up to my mom by my stepfather. I had been sexually abused as a little girl. I had seen violence around me, and so this was the norm. And then on top of that, this is happening with the man that I love, right? Something switched in me that said, no, no, I deserve better. I love myself. I deserve better. If no one else is going to stick up for me, I'm going to stick up for me. This is BS, and I don't want this. And so after those two experiences, I said, I have to change because I know where my life is going to go. It's not going to go down a good path. And I eventually broke up with him, which was the hardest thing for me to do, but I broke up with him. I wanted a future. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to do something with myself. And that's what I did. 10 years later, he showed up to my apartment and I was like, what are you doing here? Nothing, I just want to see you. And I went off on him. I screamed bloody hell in the middle of the street. Don't you ever effing mother eff it. Don't you ever. And I never saw him again.
Was that just like all the pimped up?
Well, I felt in danger. How does he figure out? This is before the internet, right? So how did he figure out where I lived? How did he know where I lived? And why does he want to talk to me 10 years later? And I was going to make it as difficult as possible for him to not want to be with. Like, there's no way you are going to get in my sphere. I will protect myself to the death. I will do that.
This is so powerful. Thank you for sharing those stories. I'm desperately trying to pull at what the hell made you finally snap. And the reason why, and maybe it's from childhood, your mom's a freaking badass, but you call it in your book, like going Bronx, I believe.
Yeah.
How does someone train to go Bronx? Now, I'm not necessarily encouraging everybody.
Yeah, and I don't encourage people to fight either. Absolutely.
You better freaking believe though, homie, if it's me or a dude that's coming at me, I'm betting on myself.
Exactly.
So I'm not encouraging.
Yeah.
But even elements of just standing up for yourself. Let's just blanket statement. What you did is you finally just stood up for yourself, right?
Yes.
What is that thing that goes from you were taught this as a child, you saw it growing up, you had unfortunate abuse, and now you're with someone, you're with him for 2 years, and then you finally go, what the hell? Because I honestly live in fear that people live that same life, but don't ever stand up for themselves.
Sure.
And they blink, and 30 years later, they're still in that abusive relationship. They've now diminished themselves even more because over the years, that abusive relationship has really stripped them of who they want to be or who they are.
Sure. Oh, gosh, that's a very hard question. I think it's different for everyone. I remember sitting in therapy and I was telling my therapist, I can't do this anymore. I have to do something different. I have to change. And she goes, well, you finally hit rock bottom. You finally hit the bottom. I was wondering when you were going to hit bottom. And that was really powerful for me to hear and supportive, right? Because it's like, how much are you going to take? How much are you going to take? What is your bottom? Ask yourself that question. What is my bottom? Like, stop and say, what is my future going to look like? Play it out in your mind. If I continue to stay, it's like a chess game. You can play all the pieces out and see, oh, for me, it was, if I don't leave, I'm going to continue to be physically abused. If I don't leave, I'm going to end up having an unwanted pregnancy. If I don't leave, I'm going to be on welfare. If I don't leave, I'm going to be a statistic. If I don't leave, I'm going to get very sad and depressed and not love myself. If I don't leave, I'm going to raise a child in this environment, and that child is going to grow up to do the same things. If I don't leave, my child is not going to feel good about themselves either, Or if I don't leave, my kid is going to end up on drugs or end up in a gang or whatever the case may be. Like, it could play out in so many ways. Like, how will your life play out if you continue in this path that is not good for you? Or what is the other option? Well, what are the potentials that could happen if you do leave? But the leaving is the hardest part, right? because what will stop us in our tracks is, well, if I leave, you know, really bad things are going to happen, and some women are in really bad situations. So I am do not belittling that in any way. I am very, very sensitive to that. But like, for example, I talk about this with my mom. I saw my mom leave an abusive relationship. I thank the Lord that my mother did that, because she modeled to me tenacity. She modeled to me drawing a boundary. She modeled to me loving herself. She modeled pulling herself up by the bootstraps and saying, I have value. I don't deserve this. I'm going to do better for me and for my kids. And that's what she did. Like, if my mother didn't do that, maybe I wouldn't have broken up with my boyfriend. Maybe I would have stayed. Who knows, right? So thank the Lord that I had that model. And so I encourage women out there who have children to be the leaders for their children, and to lead through action, and to show them that you're willing to put yourself first. Because when you put yourself first and you pick you and you take care of you, you're teaching your children to do the same things for themselves. Our job as parents is to raise our children so that they can fly the nest and take care of themselves, not have to, you know, be home, you know, we'll take care of them for the rest of our lives.
I almost like think people should have kids just as that pull to like go after their dream. Obviously, I'm kind of only half joking, but you know, it's scary, homie, how many women I've had sit opposite me and say, if it wasn't for my kid, I wouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. And it's like, just to think through, again, no bullshit, what would it actually take for us women to really live the lives that we want, to feel confident, to feel proud of ourselves, to be inspired, to inspire each other. Like, it really is that.
I mean, I still struggle with insecurity. I still hold myself back. And I want to share that because I think women or people will see quote unquote celebrities or see other people who are doing really, really well, and they just tell themselves this story that they are happy, that they have no problems, that they're so lucky, and it's just not true. Like, everyone is going through something, everyone has a burden to carry, and they also have a lot of undoing to do in their own minds from their experiences in childhood and as adults. But honestly, it's up to us to take the responsibility to live the life that we want to lead. And if we're not happy with where we are, we've got to do something about it. It's not easy, but there are things that we can do, even little things.
How the hell do you hold yourself accountable and be able to say that? Because you talk in the book about you didn't want to be a statistic, but being Latina, being born in the Bronx, not seeing anyone that looked like you on television. So you have this dream, but not really seeing it reflected anywhere. How did you build that mentality growing up in a place where people expected you to become a statistic?
Yeah. Well, I like to attribute it to my dad in a lot of ways, because he exposed me to the arts and higher learning. And he also was a great example of someone who wasn't living a good life, but then he decided to change his mind and make a difference, make a change. So I mentioned briefly in the book that my father went to prison for a year. And then he decided, I am going to do something different. This is not good for me. Boom. And he changed. And so I'm grateful for that. And so maybe some people who are listening who don't have those examples, it takes one person to start it, to change the generational cycles that are in our lives. You know, and so often people who are poor continue to have children who are also become poor, and who also, you know, same thing, or people who are wealthy tend to have kids who continue to be wealthy. Whatever the case may be, I'm not saying either one is good or bad. It's just if you're a musician, you tend to have children who play music, you know. So what are you going to teach your kids, or are you going to be the first person to change the path, change the way?
So having gone through all of that, and even though like statistically you're definitely like 0.0001% chance that you're going to make it in Hollywood, let alone make it on one of the biggest TV shows of the decade, of I think 4 decades I said earlier, where it's getting out of that is the statistical chances of that occurring are so minimal, but you didn't stop because of the chance. You just kept going. And there's a beautiful story that you talk about in the book that is another pivotal moment, that if you made a different decision, it would have led you down a different path. And it's when you get offered one of your first TV roles and you realize it's to play a gang member's girlfriend's prostitute or something like that, prostitute girlfriend. Knowing that that went against how you believe that your culture should be represented, you still chose to take it. That's such a hard decision. Now, in hindsight, again, it was a perfect decision.
It was,
because you saw your dream and you're like, I have to do this to get there. But in those moments, making those little hard decisions that maybe battle you in your heart and your soul, how did you still make the decision? Because again, I feel like these are the moments when I think about these sliding door moments. That could have changed the trajectory of your career.
Yeah, hugely.
But you could look at that and go, you sold out.
Exactly. Well, hindsight is 2020, and I can say right now, obviously it was a great decision and I was taking one for the team and all that, but I really needed to pay the rent and I needed health insurance. That was the biggest thing. And so I had to go that route. Like I didn't feel like I had many options, but it was once I made the decision and I found myself in the position, I go, okay, they're asking me to do these stereotypical things with this character that I feel is hurting me, my own psyche, my own little girl inside. It's hurting my people inside, and we're reinforcing things. So I'm not going to play into that. I'm going to subtly refuse, basically. And I started to try to just play myself and not play the way it was scripted with this head rolling or gum chewing or whatever they wanted me to do. And I just kept being me. I just kept being me, which was the other, right? This is what I taught. Our otherness is our strength. I was the other. I was keenly aware that I was the other and I was going to present as the other. But some people have these ideas of the other, and I am an other, but I am just like everyone else. And that's who I'm going to be. And honestly, that job was supposed to last for 4 months and it lasted for 2.5 years. And I do believe it was because I owned who I was. And I wasn't going to play this idea.
The reason why I love that story so much, by the way, is because there are moments where we may just go, that doesn't align with me. And I want to self-preserve. And I actually totally respect that. But there's also another option that we don't always consider. And so that's why it's like, it's not if someone's going after a role, because I think the majority of people aren't actresses and extremely successful like you, but there's so many lessons in your stories. So in this story, it's about when you're presented with an option that maybe doesn't align with you, but maybe has something of value to you, are you able to think outside the box and do what's right for you and not just feel like you're being forced to either say yes or to say no? There is that third blind option, which is exactly what you did, which is like, you're going to say yes, but you're actually going to use it to your advantage. It's so freaking strong.
Right. I want the listeners to see themselves in me, hopefully, to see the potential for themselves. So honestly, it's really comes down to decision making, and it's super simple, but it's super scary. But it is something that everyone comes across in their lives. And I really want to encourage the listeners to listen to these stories or read these stories and see the potential for themselves, and to bring awareness that they have options, that they don't always have to settle for whatever the situation is for themselves. If they have dreams in their lives, they don't have to settle for what's going on at that moment. They can make a change. They can make a difference. It's not easy, but they can do it. Absolutely.
I love that. And when I think about, though, how does someone make that change? It's the building blocks that stack, that can potentially build your confidence to then have the confidence to make the change. But sometimes it's like you have to do the act before you build the confidence.
Well, what up, homie? I got something free and new to share with you right now.
How often are you visited by that negative voice in your head telling you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, experienced enough, not fill in the blank? One of the most powerful things you can learn to do in life is to turn that negative voice into your bestie. And I want to teach you how to do that and so much more in my 4 steps to becoming confident workshop. And guys, the most amazing thing is you can actually register for completely free for this workshop. So click the link on your screen and I'll see you on the inside.
I have this, there's this quote, and I don't know where I got it from, but it's called "Action Cures Fear." And that is sort of a mantra for me sometimes, because I deal with a lot of fear on a daily basis. I'm just being so honest. I was scared to write this book. Like, I had to deal with, who do you think you are? In my mind, negative voices. Oh, you're not smart enough to write a book. You're not tenacious enough to see it through to the end. I had to deal with all those. But I said, I just take one action step after the other, one step after the other. So one of the steps, the first step for me was to go, I am going to reach out for help. I was looking for someone like a personal trainer of writing, you know. Because like I have a personal trainer. I know 2 days a week that my trainer Marcus is waiting for me to show up at 7 a.m. And if I don't show up, I'm like, I got egg on my face, right? If I didn't have him in place, I probably wouldn't show up. So I had to set myself up for a win.
Because you knew yourself well enough to know, if I want to execute on this dream, these are the things that I need. I need an accountability partner.
Exactly. And I knew that I would not see it through. I knew that I would probably be really great for the first 2 weeks. I'm going to write a book. Let me go sit down in front of my computer. I'm going to write this book. And I'm like, yeah. And then you hit a block. Oh, what am I going to write about? I don't know. And then, you know, and I'd probably be good for 2 weeks. And then after a while, I got other things to do. Oh, my kids need this. I got that. And then next thing you know, I've lost my motivation and my gumption, and nobody's waiting for me to show up to my computer. So it doesn't get done. I knew that would happen.
And then a year later, you're telling yourself, see, I told you you're no good. You tried to write a book a year ago and you haven't even finished it.
Exactly. I always play things out. How will it play out? And I obviously don't want the worst case scenario. I don't like living with regret. And I have regret in my life, and I do not like the feeling. It is a terrible feeling. But what I did do is I tried to set a bar that I knew I could reach. And the bar was, okay, I'm going to sit in front of my computer 3 to 4 days a week, minimum. And then I'm going to write a paragraph. If I can't write more than a paragraph, I'm going to sit there for an hour. And if all I get is a paragraph, then that's all I got that day. And I'm not going to beat myself up. So I tried to take care of myself. I knew what I needed to kind of like try to reach it. Because if I made it so monumental, I would give up, honestly. I didn't want to be a failure. So, you know.
Thank you for taking us through that, because I think there's so much gold in what you just said. So identifying what that goal is, I want to write the book. Know thyself. Guys, know thyself. Don't beat yourself up over it. Just go, I'm the type of person that if I don't have someone accountable, right? Like, maybe that's what you need. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just fact. And there's something else that you said earlier so you said you hate regret. But I also heard you say that regret can be really freaking powerful.
Exactly.
I've never heard of regret spoken like this. And I was like, I love tools. Now I love regret.
Yes.
So if you don't mind explaining why we should love a regret.
Yes. Well, you know, in high school, I got mixed up with this boy, Marco, and I ended up, took me 5 years to graduate high school. And it was something that I was ashamed about for a really long time. But also
because you were skipping school with him
I
and
was
stuff like that.
skipping school, exactly, yes. I was basically didn't go to school for a full year, hanging out with Marco. And I just didn't feel good about myself, that I didn't focus on my school, which made me feel bad about myself. Like, if I felt like a failure, basically. But in a lot of ways, I wasn't a failure. I just failed. I just failed the class, or I didn't pass because I didn't put the work in. And that was the regret, because I had full control all along and I didn't do something about it. I let it go. And that regret was the motivator for me in my career, to not give up, to persevere. Like, you know, we don't want to feel that feeling again. That's a terrible feeling. Let's keep going. We don't want to have regret. I really believe in exploring your inner world and what's going on and what's operating you, what's driving your ship. That way you can be in control. You can get online. Like, we're walking around subconscious so often that's one of the reasons why we cannot achieve our dreams, or we can't achieve our goals, because we have all of these mental hurdles that are completely in our way and we have no idea.
Yeah. Oh, so speaking of those mental hurdles, again, using your stories, because I love that you're such a great storyteller, homie. And so there's another story that you tell in your book. where you say you're going for, I believe, a CW network interview or something.
Yes.
Tell me that story, because homie, like the balls that you have on you to like speak up in that moment, I really want to like pull apart, and I want that story for other people to take with them when they want the strength to speak up.
Sure, sure. This day, I was sitting in the casting offices of the CW network, and as I was sitting in the waiting room, I was looking on the monitors, and I was going to be meeting with the heads of casting at the time that my manager set me up for. And so I'm looking at the monitors, and I'm watching the trailers of all the shows they had on the air at the time. And I sat there noticing that there weren't a lot of people of color. And I'm sitting there going, huh, where are the brown people? I don't see any brown people. Oh, there's one in the background. Yeah, oh, there it is. Oh. And so then I go, why am I here? Why am I having this interview? They're not going to hire me because I don't see anyone like me on their TV shows. And so then I go, well, Andrea, stop having those self-defeating thoughts. You never know. And don't say that in the interview. Well, no, they need to know. And I'm like, no, okay, no, be quiet.
You're having this whole dialogue in your head.
It's like an angel and a devil on my shoulder. And so then I go into the meeting. I'm having a talk with the casting directors. Everything's going splendidly. Having a great conversation. I'm charming. They're charming. Everything is wonderful. And then all of a sudden I hear myself say, you know, I was sitting in the waiting room and I noticed that you don't have a lot of people of color in your shows. And I went, Andrea, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, no, they need to know that they need people of color on their shows. And then the casting directors are like, well, that's not true. We have so-and-so and so-and-so. And then it was like, I felt like I don't know, an eternity of silence.
Like crickets and just like the tumbleweed.
Yes. Like, oh my God, I just ruined this meeting. And then one of them says, you know, we do realize that we need more diversity on our show. And you know what? You would be great for the role of this pilot that we have coming up called Jane the Virgin as the role of the mother, Xiomara. And I went, oh, okay. And that was it. I didn't think about it afterwards. I left and I go, Andrea, you just ruined that meeting. What the heck are you thinking? And 2 months later, I'm auditioning for Jane the Virgin for the role of Xiomara. And then,
I love that story
and then the
so
rest
much.
is history.
I love that story so much, because there's another world. I'm going to keep saying your entire story is there's another world you couldn't have done that or shouldn't have done that. And then you don't end up taking the role that changes your life.
Right.
I've got another quote of yours.
Okay.
That I think so many of us really struggle with finding our worth and really understanding and knowing our value. And I think in moments you even said, I paid my dues, right? Like I played the freaking prostitute. Like I'm just going to freaking say it. I paid my dues.
Right.
I do think that comes with building self-worth as well, right? Like you've built your self-worth over time, so that by the time you got to that room, you probably felt value to yourself, right? And that like, hang on a minute, I do have a right to say this. You talk in your book, you say, my journey was perfectly set up to make me feel the negative impact of not being valued. So the negative impact of not being valued, how the hell do you now see that as a positive thing?
Because it lit a fire in me. The feeling of not being valued, of not being seen, of not being heard is an awful feeling. And it made me angry. That anger has fueled me in many ways in my career to go, no, I have value. I will pick myself. I will show up. Yeah, I know I don't see a lot of me out there, but I'm going to show up anyway. I'm going to stake my claim. I'm going to say, I'm here. I have value and I have something to offer. And that's been probably the driving force for me in my life is that.
Is it that added with, there's another chapter in your book where it's like, own your shit.
Own your shit.
Is it that? Is it like knowing your value, really saying, no, I won't. And then saying, but I have to own my shit and how I show up every day.
Exactly. That's one of my favorite chapters, owning your shit, because when you own your shit, you are taking 100% responsibility for your life, for everything that has happened to you, is happening to you, and will happen to you. Even if things that have happened to you were unfair and were wrong, you still have to take responsibility for it what you're going to do now. What are you going to do moving forward? Yeah, maybe somebody shouldn't have done that to you, but now what are you going to do with that? I think that is so important, owning your shit, taking 100% responsibility. Like, I'm going to be straight up honest. I can be so lazy. I can procrastinate like nobody's business. And I have to get to a point where I'm like, Andrea, I have to be honest with myself. Andrea, what are you doing? You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not doing what you said you were going to do. I have to hold myself accountable. And it's when you hold yourself accountable and you take 100% responsibility and you stop leaving it on other people's hands and stop blaming, you can change your life. You can get the things you want. You can move ahead. You can move forward. But it all ends with you.
And is that ignoring, I believe you call it your counter voice in your head?
Yes, or I would say my manager voice. That's, it's actually through my therapy that I've done with my therapist, that we all have these different parts of us that have cordoned off or sectioned off through trauma. And so one of them can be the security guard at the gate who's not going to let any bad person in. Like, for example, or the fighter, we have a fighter who's going to throw down. And my fighter developed at age 16 when I had my boyfriend being abusive to me. And I never found myself in that position again, because that fighter is strong and she will come out and she will kick ass, and she might not, she might be walking away licking her wounds, but she will give somebody a fight for their money, So different parts of us, I believe, come up. And then there's the manager, who is the one that gets me to my appointments and gets me to to the gym or whatever.
So if you don't mind breaking this down a bit more, I actually love this.
Yeah.
So what do? Do you identify the voices in your head and then give them like job titles?
Yeah, you can give them a name, you can give them a job title. So I know that I have those parts in me, and sometimes I have to stop and talk to them or listen to the parts. This is something that I've worked with my therapist, is to stop and listen to the part and what it has to say, because it will keep nagging you and getting in your way and not letting you achieve. So sometimes I have to listen to my manager and say, you know what, I agree, I have to go to the gym. You're right, but not today. Why? Because I'm super, super tired, and the little girl in me needs some rest right now. So it's having these kind of conversations. I know this sounds really woo-woo right now.
Wow, this is you know how many people here is like, oh my God, thank God she's just like me.
Yeah.
We all have the voice in our
Yes.
head, homie.
Yeah, no, we do. And sometimes it's like, these parts of us have developed at certain ages. So like my fighter is age 16. But my inner child, the one who was sexually abused, is 6.5 years old. And sometimes she's the one who has the most fear and stops me from trying new things because it's too scary and we don't know what's going to happen. We might get hurt again. And then like the security guard or the fighter will come in and go, no, we're not going. She's scared, so we're not going to do that scary thing because we don't know what's going to happen. And so it's just becoming aware of your psychology and how it's operating. I really believe it's important, especially in therapy, to just explore your childhood trauma, know what your triggers are, what are the things that scare you the most and why, explore them, shed a light on them, and then they have a lot less power.
Wow, that's so cool. I've always just called her the bitch in my head.
Exactly.
So it's like, I actually like giving them different job titles.
Yeah.
Because like, again, I'm so strategic that I would go, oh, okay, I would give this person the job title and then the job description of what their responsibilities are.
Yeah.
So the security guard is, when I have the fear, you're here to protect me. But Mr. Security Guard or Mrs. Security Guard, I'm going to choose not to listen to you, right? And so like having like
Exactly.
these like pre-written approaches of how you're going to deal with the voices, I freaking love this.
No, and I do it in journaling too. So when I'm going through a really hard time emotionally, I will sit down and write, and sometimes I'll go, okay, who's speaking right now? Oh, it's the manager speaking, or oh, it's my little child. And well, what do you want to say? And I write it out. I write everything that they're scared of and all the things, and then I counter it. I hear what you're saying. That makes sense. You love me. You want to protect me. But adult Andrea is in the room right now, and I'm going to take charge. So why don't you go off and play for now, and I'm going to be taking care of everything. I've got this, but thank you. It's that kind of dialogue, and I write it out. It's so helpful.
Oh, I love that. Homie, where can people find you, your amazing book that you share all of these freaking stories and so much more?
Thank you. They can find me on AndreaNavedo.com. That's my website, and at Andrea Navedo on Instagram and Facebook, and Andrea Navedo Official. And please go out and buy the book, because it's going to be really important. It's going to change your life. It's going to make you feel so good about yourself, and it's going to help you to see your potential.
Oh yeah, guys, you gotta go check out her book. It is chock full of amazing stories, just like what she shared here. And the takeaways of these stories really are freaking tools that you guys can go and use right now in your own life, so that you can keep showing up, stand up for yourself, just like her. And maybe, just maybe, you have a security guard in your head that you can tell to quieten down as well. All right, guys, click that subscribe button. Until next time, be the hero of your own life. Peace. To learn how to take back your freaking power when you fall to your knees, click here right now.
Believe that this is that moment where life is trying to say, and you lost. And I thought, who could I be for myself and my future self if I thought, nope, this is when the phoenix rises.